As you know, this is Budget 101 series. Victor and I thought about at the end of last budget season as a way to get ahead of providing information about the whole process, because it is complex and complicated. And if you enter the narrative, at a certain point, you might have missed all the important background information that would be very useful in understanding what these numbers represent. So the Budget 101 series is an attempt to provide some what we consider to be very useful background information on what makes up a school budget. All of the information that is prepared and is left in the back for you to collect is also on our website. I want to thank Chris Whalen for being here, for making a video of this, which will also be available on our website. We also are part of the Facebook live chat. So if for those who are not able to come, they can follow us online on Facebook. Ms. Keen, thank you over there for taking notes for us, or collecting notes, and you'll be a part of the Q&A. So we're going at it at every angle to make sure that there are many, many places that our community can go to find out information about the whole budgeting process. So as a kickoff, before we get into the nitty-gritty of what makes up a fairly significant part of the school budget, I just wanted to, again, thank Mr. Carlson for a lot of his time in thinking about, how to make the information digestible to the public that doesn't live in this. I want to thank Mr. Scarrett, who he'll introduce shortly, who plays a pretty significant role across the region in terms of knowing about the whole negotiations process all across the Westchester and Powder County region, and probably more broadly, because it's critical information that school districts look at when they make decisions and they're looking at contract negotiations. You better believe they tap into Mr. Scarrett to get a sense of things. It's trend data. So to start with, you may not think of a public school district as a service industry, but we are. That's what we do. Our services are to educate young people. So everything that we do in our budget is about that. And so all of the primary expenditures go into paying people to do those things. And so Victor and I wanted to kind of give you a lot of information or background to help you understand what that means. And so keep that in mind when we go through this, because Victor's going to go pretty deeply into some of the details of what makes up a big portion of the district's school budget. As an overview, we're going to talk about collective bargaining agreements, steps, pensions, FICA, workers' compensation, health, and other welfare benefits, which make up that huge portion of salaries. You'll see as part of an infographic series that Victor and I worked on. This is one of them. There are several of them. They are also on our website. We wanted to provide you with a graphic that helped to kind of demystify some of the information, and we hope that this helps you, that the balance always is around what we can control, and then obviously what we can't control, and Victor will get into that in greater depth. He'll go over this formula here in the middle, which is all the components that make up the cost of employment, the cost of operating the service industry, as well as the graphics associated with contribution rates and the allocation that's represented in the pie chart. As I said, a significant portion of the school budget is salaries, 78%, and we're no different from other school districts. The big portion is what's considered the zero-based budgeting, or zero-based budget portion of this, and if you were here or if you went on the website, you saw that first presentation that talked about what zero-based budgeting is, and it really is a matter of looking at your expenses from year to year and analyzing them to make sure that you're making decisions about whether or not you need to increase or decrease costs. So that's the basis of zero-based budgeting. And it means that if we have an employee who retires at a certain salary, let's say that employee has been here for 30 years and they retire at a salary of $140,000. We are obviously not going to go out and try to find somebody for that salary. We reset. You look at your needs, you look at, where that person fall on the salary schedule as a new employee. We're going to go into looking at the different groups that are functioning under contract. Every person in this service industry has a contract. And we'll talk about what that means and what the limitations are around that as well. And you see the other portions that Victor will speak to pretty clearly with regards to what they represent, what kinds of controls and limitations we have around those things. And as this pie chart illustrates, we look at policy. Policy lives here. Policy lives in decisions with regards to class sizes, how many children we can have in class sizes, in each class, and what the rate is. We obviously are governed by enrollment data. We look pretty closely at enrollment data over the course of 5-6 years. We subscribe to a service that provides that to us. Every school district subscribes to some kind of system that tracks births over time. And that's the basis for our ability to be able to determine whether we're going to have a large 6th grade, a small 3rd grade, what's going to happen or impact that next school that those students go to, where that grade level happens to be larger or smaller. That's very important data to look at. Obviously, mandated services like IEPs and English as a new language learners and other courses are also decisions and factors that go into who we employ and what those benefits are. Just very quickly, we're going to go over the 6 contracted groups. There's 6 groups in our district that that operate or are serviced under contract. The Administrators Association is represented by principals and directors, assistant principals, assistant directors. That's anyone who's certificated who holds a New York State administration certification. Either it's a school district administration degree, which allows that administrator to function across multiple buildings, or school building administrator, which would be a principal, so that person is connected to the school. The BTA, the Brewster Teachers Association, is composed of obviously teachers, teaching assistants, nurses, psychologists, social workers, school counselors, occupational therapists, physical therapists, and speech therapists. All of those people are consumed under that Brewster Teachers Association. The clerical unit has typists and receptionists and clerks, and they're primarily governed by the civil service system. Our next group under contracts is SEIU. That's the Service Employees International Union, which covers all mechanics, maintenance, cleaners, drivers, monitors, aides, cooks, and food service team. Our substitute teachers are covered under a unit, a bargaining unit. And the last group is our non-union individual contracts. These are non-bargaining groups of people who are under an umbrella where they're not part of these other collective bargaining groups, but they do have a contract. So that's district office administrators, non-instructional directors and assistant directors, transportation, and our facilities and buildings and grounds team, confidential secretaries, head custodians, technology, network specialists, transportation operations assistants, and mechanic supervisors. Those are the 6 groups. There's not a single person in this district that does not fall under a contract. That's part of the rules of being in the service industry. So this is a representation of all the people under this group and what the numbers are. We just thought that would be helpful. And this is where Victor will pick up the rest of the presentation to go in more deeply into what's behind the numbers.
Sure. So thank you everyone for coming this evening. Before I get started, I just want to again acknowledge Michael Scarry, who is the Director of Human Resources at Putnam Northern Westchester BOCES, and I'll turn it over to Mike quickly.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Victor, for the opportunity to be here. I applaud Dr. Henning Piedmont and Victor for running this series of workshops. I think it's imperative that any community kind of understand the budget process. It's such an important process. It impacts all the lives of the staff here and certainly the students that are educated. And again, I really applaud you for doing this and sharing this information.
And Mike has some information that he's going to share with us later on in the presentation. And what we really want for these workshops, we really want it to be interactive. So if you have any questions, please stop me in the middle at any point, ask questions. Again, we want it to be interactive so that we can provide as much information to you as possible. And for others who are at home, who may have the same questions as you, we really want this to be informative. So please stop me at any point if you have any questions. So this chart here is an allocation of all of our salaries by group. Obviously, as Dr. Henning mentioned, we are in a service industry, and our services to students. So naturally, our teachers make up, or our PTA makes up the majority of our salaries, about 2/3, and we have 300 employees operating under the PTA union. Sub-teachers make up less than 1% of our staffing, with only 89 employees. SEIU, again, the Service Employees International Unit, which is primarily our bus drivers, monitors, aides, monitors, and staff, make up about 18.2 of our salary base. We have 150 full-time employees and 130 part-time employees. AAB, the Administrators Association of Brewster, we have 14 employees, make up 4.6% of the salary base. Clerical unit has 25 employees, make up 2.5% of the salary base. And again, the non-union employees, there are 29 of them, and these employees are not part of a collective bargaining unit. They have individual contracts with the district. They make up 6.1% of the salary base. So the first thing I want to go over are related to the collective bargaining agreement. So within the collective bargaining agreement, there is a schedule, and within that schedule, there are steps. So these salary schedules were established decades before the tax cap came into existence. So long before there was ever a tax cap, the district negotiated with its bargaining units these salary schedules that had incremental steps from year to year, depending on your years of service. So within our existing contracts, all of the contracts across the district, we have within those contracts step increases that range from 1% up to 6.7% within those different employee types. Employees on top step are not eligible for a step increase; they reach the ceiling. So that's important to note. You'll see that later on as I go through each of the different bargaining units. Another important thing to note, and Mr. Scarahue will speak some more to this later on, but the VTA and clerical units have agreed to a new salary schedule for new unit members, meaning prospectively, after a certain date when we hire a new employee, they go on a different salary schedule as opposed to the one that preceded that. These new salary schedules have lower step increases, which slow the wage growth and help the district to comply with the tax cap. AAB and non-union employees do not have salary schedules, so they have individual employment contracts, and the wage increases for the AAB are established through a collective bargaining agreement, while the non-union employee wage increases are awarded annually by resolution of the Board of Education. Okay, so what is a step?
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
What's the difference between step increase and schedule?
Those are my next two slides. Okay, so what is a step increase? So a step increase is an annual incremental increase in salary based upon years of service. So here's a hypothetical salary schedule, a 4-step schedule, and we're showing the 17-18 year hypothetical. So an employee on step 1 would be earning $50,000. An employee who may be here for 2 years would likely be on step 2, and they'd be earning $52,000. So the step increase from step 1 to step 2 is valued at $2,000, or a 4% increase. An employee on step 3 would be earning $53,000, which is $1,000 more than the prior step, or a 1.9% increase. And these step increases vary, again, all throughout the different bargaining units and all throughout each different employee type. So they're rarely the same. And they range from 1 to 6.7% across all of the different bargaining units. So we're going to take a look at the advancement of 2 hypothetical employees.
In a given year? So the 1 to 6.7% could be for any employee in a given year?
In a given year, depending on how many years of service they are and what employee type they are. So we're going to look at 2 hypothetical employees. We have one new employee who was on step 1 in 17-18, and we have another employee who's been here for a few years, could be here for 10 years, on step 4, which is the top step. So again, this is a hypothetical salary schedule of an employee or of 2 employees, green and purple, in the 17-18 school year. Okay, so what is a schedule increase? A schedule increase is a percent increase that's applied to the entire schedule. So in 17-18, the salary schedule was composed of these 4 steps at these 4 amounts. a schedule increase of 2% was applied to this old schedule to fast forward to 2018-19. So now the value of step 1 is $51,000 as opposed to the value it was in 17-18, which is $50,000. The value of step 2 is now $53,040 as opposed to 52, and 3 as opposed to prior 3, and step 4, because employees on step 4, there's nowhere else to step. The schedule increase is limited to that step 4 amount. So you'll see that the 2% application to step 4 results in an increase of $2,500. So it really compounds the step increase with the schedule increase. So again, following those two employees, we had an employee in 17-18 making $50,000 on step 1. That employee advances to step 2 in the 18-19 school year, and that value, that salary is now $53,040. So the sum of the step increase and the schedule increase results in what we call the effective increase, the actual amount that we will be paying that employee more than the prior year. So now that employee who's now on step 2 is at $53,040, up from $50,000 even in the year prior. Their effective increase is $3,040, and their effective increase as a percentage is now 6.1%. So I just want to go back to that to the previous slide just to show how that works. So again, the value of the step is 4%. The application of the step increase plus the schedule increase results in an effective increase of 6.1% for that employee. Now contrast that with the purple employee who's on top step. They're not eligible to advance because there is no step 5. So step 4 is now valued at $55,590, an increase of $55,590, an increase of $1,090. So it's the amount here less the amount they were making the year prior, and their wage increase is $1,090 or just 2%. So they're limited to the schedule increase. And this is important to know because the majority of our employees are on top step, and therefore they're only entitled to the value of that step increase. Does anyone have questions with that? Because this is very
No, I have a question. What about tiers? I know teachers get tiers. Is that the specs?
tiers in terms of.
A teacher's contract, I know there's different tiers. They get raises to tiers. Tier 1, tier 2.
Tiers for
Is that their
retirement.
contract?
That's retirement.
That's retirement. It's not-
No, that's
Well,
retirement.
that
That's the
affects the-
TRS system.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm
Yeah,
just
that-
curious.
Yeah, it's up
That's
to,
a
I think,
pension
tier
system.
6
And
or
that goes
something.
into a different.
Yep, and this is salary alone. So that's pension, which I will cover.
So a person who's reached step 4 will only get the step increases with each year. They wouldn't receive any more.
They would only get the schedule.
Sorry, the schedule increases. They wouldn't get any more. Step 4 is the highest. I'm just curious, why not just pay people whatever that step is in 2018-19? Why are we doing it in 2 increments versus having just one increase? If you're reassessing, I don't know if that's market-based or what that drives that that schedule increase. And I don't know if there's a schedule increase every year, so there must be some kind of market positioning, I presume, that's driving that. I'm unclear as to why we need both.
So again, this is a hypothetical example of
Yeah.
how things have been traditionally pre-tax cap. Post-tax cap, as Mr. Scarab will discuss, negotiations haven't been typical as they've been in the past. This is more of a traditional contract settlement, and in fact, this doesn't apply to all of our bargaining units, but this is a traditional contract, and it's determined through collective bargaining. So each of these, the different bargaining units have an agreement which is negotiated with the school district, and it usually lasts for 3 to 5 years. So if an agreement is reached that applies a percentage increase to the salary schedule, the district is bound by that for the duration of that contract until it's negotiated again.
So what would happen if the schedule went lower than what?
Well, then,
No bargaining unit does that.
no. because
Because they're negotiating the salary range and the salary increase, but then it feels like they're getting 2 increases.
Well, the schedule exists. Again, the schedule has existed for many, many years. Usually what's negotiated is the schedule increase. So, you know, when this salary schedule, this hypothetical salary schedule was created, you know, many, many years ago, in all likelihood, the value of step one, whatever it was at that time, say it was, you know, $40,000, these usually remain constant, the percentage increases. And how this number changed over time was a result of those schedule increases. And how is that determined? It's through negotiations. So, you know, once every, you know, 3 or 5 years, depending on the duration of the contract, they're renegotiated, and the bargaining unit, you know, negotiates with the district based on, you know, market conditions as you described, what other districts are paying, you know, what other, you know, units have settled for in the past, and a number of other things. That's, you know, what goes into the negotiation process.
And these are all New York State contracts?
These are local contracts with the Brewster Central School District. So, you know, Carmel's bargaining units, they have agreements with their district, and Mayapack the same, and Katona the same, and they're all different.
And why, so, final question, and I'll let others ask. Why can't you say these are decades-old contracts? Why can we not renegotiate these? When I see, for example, 6.7% increase, if I look across the past 20 years, we haven't been having 6.7% increases. We've been more in the 2% and 3%, maybe good years 4%. So, you know, and it's probably outside your control, so I understand. So
No,
it's more of
that's a
venting
great question.
that it feels really unfair that we're locked into for decades contracts that determine increases that don't really tie to what the real market is, or wage increases, or.
That's an excellent
Pushing.
question, and a really important concept for us to cover. I'm going to ask Mike to chime in on that.
And it's a
Okay.
perfect segue, and I thank you very much for asking that question. I think later in the PowerPoint, we'll hit on some of this, but in addition to my role as the HR Director and Director of Professional Development at Northwestern Moses, I also oversee our negotiations clearinghouse service, which works with 63 school districts throughout Putnam, Westchester, and Rockland counties, and it's a service that pulls together the collective bargaining agreements and other labor relations materials so that districts can use that information to make sure that they're being current with the market. As Victor had mentioned, these contracts go back a long time, right? You know, around the clock 30, 40 years ago, there was a need to incent people to get into the teaching profession, so salary schedules were created. There's law in New York State called the Taylor Law that says to change those collective bargaining agreements, there needs to be a good faith negotiation. So unlike private industry where if there's no collective bargaining agreements, the company can say, you know, we're going to slash salaries, we're going to slash benefits, and you can take it or leave it if you'd like to work here. You can't do that in New York State per law. If you're unable to come to an agreement at the end of the contract, another law called Triborough Law kicks in, which means the existing terms and conditions of the agreement must stay in place. So those 6.7%, and that was just one step across the many, many steps throughout the 6 contracts. But that would have to stay in place. So districts would have and unions potentially would have a reason to come to the table and say, you know what, we understand. We don't want to keep agreements in place for 40 years. We want to get current with the times, for better or for worse for either side. But the only way to do that would be through an active negotiation. If not, things would stay in place year after year after year, and there'd be no way to make those changes.
I was just kind of curious, were you displeased with the increases? Because the public sector has completely surpassed salaries of the private sector.
Not necessarily. No, not
In a big way.
necessarily. It has not.
Oh, yeah.
So that was an
If you line them up,
excellent question.
Public sector has totally.
So steps, in essence, are awarded almost for longevity, right? Like it's almost like
Years
a
of
step.
service.
So you could have a schedule increase that's limited to 1 to 5%, whatever, but the longevity is paid off up to a certain amount of time.
Yeah.
But there were years that we had contracts that were negotiated in district where they opted for 0% schedule increases, but they still were at least,
Correct.
where they could, got their step increase.
Yes, and you'll see that as we go through Brewster's actual contract. So again, this is hypothetical
Right.
for purposes of describing the advancement through step and then the application of the schedule increase. But we're going to get into detail on our actual contracts here at Brewster to show you some of the things that we've done through negotiation with our bargaining units. So would anyone like me to go over this one more time? It's a really important concept that I just want to make sure that everyone's aware of. So I'll be as quick as possible. So again, we're following two employees from the 17-18 year going into the 18-19 year. The value of each step is shown here as a percentage and here as a dollar amount. We're following two employees. One is a new employee on step 1, and another is an employee who's been here for several years who's on step 4. Through application of a hypothetical schedule increase, the salary schedule changes and the values of each step changes. So this employee who was on step 1 in 17-18 is now advanced to step 2 in 18-19. And their salary is now $53,040, which is actually $3,040 more than the amount they were making the prior year. So the combination of the step increase and the schedule increase becomes our effective increase, the actual amount that we've increased the employee's wages, which in this example results in a 6.1% increase. Contrast that with an employee who was on top step in the prior year and reached their ceiling, so they're on top step again in the subsequent year, making $55,590, an increase of $1,090 from the amount they were making the year prior, and their effective increase is just limited to 2%. Again, they've ran out of steps, so therefore they're only entitled to a schedule increase. And the majority of our employees are on top step, so this hypothetical scenario applies to the majority of our employees because they've reached top step of their respective salary schedule. So this again is a summary of what an effective increase is, because that is really what determines the cost increases to the district. And we discussed this with our bargaining units during negotiations, because it is the combination of the step increase and the salary increase that actually affects our bottom line. So we looked at the employee who was in green, advancing from step 1 to step 2. They had an effective increase of 6.1%. That employee who was on top step ran out of steps, so they were not eligible for a step increase in the subsequent year, received the schedule increase of 2%, and that was the limit of their salary increase. Again, employees on top step are not eligible for a step increase, and the majority of our employees are on top step, as I'll show in these next several slides. So now I'm going to go through each of the different bargaining units and just give examples of minimum step increases, and these are anybody who's eligible to step increase, the minimum step increase within the contract. And as you may recall, within the SEIU unit, there are a number of different employee types in the SEIU bargaining unit. And here's the max step that we referenced in the opening slide. So at a minimum, heading into the 18-19 school year, anybody who was eligible to step, the lowest step, the value of that step was 2.1%. The schedule increase going into 18-19 was 1.75%, and the effective increase for those employees who were eligible for a minimum increase on step had an effective increase of 3.8%. Now contrast this with the other extreme. The largest step increase within the bargaining unit was 6.7%. Again, they had a schedule increase of 1.75, and the effective increase for an employee who was on this step was 8.6%. This is really the exception. I just want it to be noted, this is the exception. This is certainly not the rule. And you'll see right here, 70% of our bargaining unit members within the SEIU unit fall in this category. They're already on top step. So as we mentioned, employees on top step are not eligible for a step increase, so there's no value in terms of the step increase to their salary. The schedule increase was 1.75%, so therefore their effective increase was limited to just that schedule increase. Again, 70% of our bargaining unit members fall within this category in the SEIU unit. And for purposes of this example, this excludes longevity or overtime or any other types of compensation. This is just salary only. So another one of our collective bargaining units is the clerical unit, and you'll see two slides for that because the clerical unit, the last round of negotiations, agreed to a new salary schedule for new employees, respectively, that limits step increases, and I'll show that in the next slide. Employees on the existing salary schedule they had a unique approach to the negotiation, or I should say that we had a unique approach to the negotiation. They wanted to target those employees who had minimal step increases. So you'll see here the employees who had a 1.1% step increase, they wanted to apply some of the majority of their schedule increase to those employees, and therefore their effective increase came up to 1.9%. They recognized that there were some employees who were eligible for as much as 8.2% step increase, and they didn't want to apply anything there. So therefore, the effective increase for these employees was 8.2%. And actually, I actually want to note that this is going from step 1 to step 2, and we had no employees eligible for this step increase. So for purposes of this presentation, I included it here, but the reality is we had no employees who were eligible for that. The majority of our unit members, 56% of them, were on top step. Therefore, they weren't eligible for a step increase, and we applied a 2.5% increase to them to get their effective increase up to 2.5%. So now we'll look at the new salary schedule for new clerical unit members. Recognizing that we're now in a tax cap environment, the clerical unit and also the BTA, actually the BTA originally, and subsequently the clerical unit agreed to a new salary schedule for all new unit members hired after a certain date, and it really took effect from the 17-18 school year. And that limited the step increases for all of the different employee types to just 2%. Now, we always talk about 2% and related to the tax cap. I'll take this opportunity again to say that there is no such thing as a 2% tax cap. 2% is simply one component of an 8-step formula. But for reference, we use 2% as a basis, but certainly there's no such thing as a 2% tax cap. So again, employees who have a minimal step increase of 2%, no schedule increase for this contract, and the effective increase is 2%. Same thing with the max step. They again eliminated every step increase to just 2%, which will arrive at a 2% effective increase. Employees on top step would not have anywhere to steps. There's no increase there, and they wouldn't have a schedule increase. And it's going to take about 30 years for someone to get on top step again, because it's a 30-year salary schedule moving forward. And you can see we have 8% of our bargaining unit members who are on the new salary schedule. So as we have employees retire or leave the district who are on the old schedule, our new employees who replace them will be subject to this new salary schedule, and again limited to these step increases that help the district comply with the tax contract.
Victor?
Yes.
I think one of them, you said that 70% of the bargaining unit is at the top step. I forget which union that is. So how many steps are in that one? So is it like 25? Is it 30?
In the SEIU bargaining unit, I believe that there are 7 steps.
7. Okay.
7 steps.
Whereas, so 7 steps in that one. How many in clerical? How many in teacher?
Okay, so 7 steps in the SEIU unit, and that's universal, I believe, across the board of all the different employee types. Within the clerical unit, again, there are 2 salary schedules, one for existing employees who have been employed by the district before either 16, 17, or 17, 18. I want to say that there are 12 or 16 steps within that salary schedule. The new salary schedule is 30 steps, so it's elongating the salary schedule, but it's limiting the increases. So it takes an employee longer to get to top step under the new salary schedule.
And the BTA, that's how many?
And the BTA, the existing BTA salary schedule, I want to say is up to 23 steps. The new salary schedule is 30 steps. So then we'll get into the BTA schedule, and this applies to all employees before the 2016-17 school year. Minimum step increase for anyone eligible to step was 0.9%. The schedule increase you see here was 0. Again, the BTA recognized in their negotiations that they wanted to apply the schedule increases to everyone. So the effective increase for these employees was 0.9%. Maximum step increase for employees in this bargaining unit, again, this is the exception, not the rule. 6.7%, and no schedule increase was applied to that to the schedule. And and the effective increase for any employee on that step would be 6.7%. 45% of our bargaining unit members fall on top step. And again, because they reached top step, they weren't eligible for a step increase, and they had a 1% schedule increase. Their effective increase was just 1%. So again, 45% of our bargaining unit members are on top step, and their effective increase is 1%. And again, for purposes of this presentation, this longevity. So this is the new salary schedule, and because there are different not employee types, but different graduate histories. So we have bachelor's, master's plus 30, master's plus 60. Generally, we limited it to 2%. I want to say the middle column, which I believe is the master's 30 column, is at 2%. Minimum step increase for anyone with a bachelor's degree was 1.6%. No schedule increase, and the effective increase is just 1.6%. Maximum step increase, and I believe this is for anyone with a doctoral degree, had a 2.3% increase, 0% schedule increase. Their effective increase is just 2.3%. And top step, again, would likely take about 30 years for anyone to get to this top step, but it would be a 0% increase. This applies to any unit members hired after May 24th, 2016, and to date we have 8% of the bargaining unit who's on this new salary schedule. So as teachers retire, the new teachers who come on to replace them will be on this new salary schedule, falling within these two step increases. Any questions with the salary schedule?
Next question, are we doing any incentives this year? The top salaries, with some top salary heavy?
We haven't discussed any salary incentives. We've not discussed it.
With some top heavy? Just a question.
Well, I mean, if it is something that needs to occur, I mean, there are variables that go into to determining that as well. Each year, in the last few years, I think there have been about 8 to 10 employees who have retired. And again, it's a very personal decision, based upon your own life. And, some people, are ready when they hit that time in which they can do it, and others are not. And a lot, it's driven by the same things that drive your decisions, right? Whether you have children in college, whether, how far you are off from paying your mortgage. So there are a lot of different factors, and it may not be that incentive is going to be sufficient to cover
Well, that's
those
the
needs.
question, that's money, the incentive.
Finally, we have the AAB, the District Office Employees, the AAB Administrators Association of Brewster, and District Office Administrators who increase their salaries for the 18-19 school year. The AAB unit has a salary, a collective bargaining agreement with the district that had built-in increases that range from 0% to 5%, which was foregone in the 18-19 school year. The reason for the range here is because that bargaining unit chose to disperse their salary increases or to the employees who were lower paid to try to catch them up to their peers throughout the region, and those members who were more seasoned took 0% increases within the 18-19 school year. However, again, both district office administrators and AAB agreed to salary increases for the 18-19 school year and their effective increases. And our non-union employees, again, we have about, I want to say 25 of these employees. Each year their raises are approved annually by resolution of Board of Education. Heading into 18-19, they had their increases range from 0% to 2.9%, and that's their effective increase. Again, because they're not part of a bargaining unit, they do not have a salary schedule. They have individual employee contracts, which are negotiated annually. Anyone have any questions with the salary schedule for it? All right. Yep.
So the increases based on performance or just across the board, they just?
In terms of the collective bargaining agreements?
Automatic.
Yeah,
So
the
they give us the most problems with people and they're still getting it.
The collective bargaining agreements are set forth for several years. Again, they typically range from 3 to 5 years. Our collective bargaining agreement with our teachers unit runs through the 2020 school year. So again, that agreement is agreed by the Board of Education, and it's set forth in the next 4 years.
Yeah, I was about to say that, so it isn't,
Yeah.
the very best, teacher
That's a union
doesn't
job.
get, any merit pay either, so, that's a job. Well, but still, there are other systems that do have merit-based systems, but our one.
So the next several slides, we're going to be talking about the associated benefits that are afforded to employees. And when you can, take a look at the infographic that we produced, because it's very telling that there are many things that are beyond our control. The moment the district employs an individual, they're either subject to a collective bargaining agreement, and those raises are set forth within the terms of the collective bargaining agreement. You have a pension, which is guaranteed by New York State. All employees in the state of New York are eligible to participate in the New York State pension system. This is state law. This is not a district. District offering. This is New York State law. Every employee within the state of New York or local government are eligible to participate in the pension system. For non-certificated employees, they're eligible to participate in the employee retirement system, or TRS. Teachers or certificated employees like teachers, teaching assistants, administrators are eligible to participate in the teachers retirement system. Again, the state of New York defines the pension system. They tell us, hey, Brewster Central School District and all other schools, for all members in the ERS system, you have to send to Albany X% of their salaries. For all employees in the TRS system, you have to send to Albany Y% of their salaries, and there's no negotiation. So New York State tells us what we have to send them, and we have to send them. You'll see it's very challenging on our budget. But much like what Brewster has tried to do locally in terms of negotiations, the state has also done in terms of tiers. You asked earlier about tiers. So the pension system, both pension systems have tiers depending on the date of your membership. And they're again defined by New York State. So generally, what the state has done for any new employees hired on or after January 1, 2010, in any local government, not just here in Brewster, but anywhere, they're in a different tier. And they either have a longer vesting period, a longer service career, or a reduced benefit at the end of their career.
Higher contribution.
Higher contribution rate, correct. And again, that's generally for employees hired on or after January 1st, 2010. So that's a perspective change. It's going to take quite some time for the local governments, school districts, and taxpayers to feel the relief that's going to be provided. Again, you'll see a theme throughout all of these slides that pension contributions are New York State law. They're beyond our control and cannot be changed.
Victor,
Yes.
is that a defined benefit plan? So are those defined benefit plans?
It is a defined benefit.
And is there any, I know this is out of your control, but is there any thinking that they may change those over in the future to defined contribution plans? Because that's where basically everything else is going.
I can't answer that because again, this is a state plan. But what I can tell you is that since that date, we have introduced 2 new tiers for new members. There have always been talks about adding more tiers, and I do remember a conversation about it being a defined contribution plan, which I think is actually an offering that new employees on a certain tier, I want to say tier 6, can either opt into a defined contribution plan or stay with the defined benefit plan, but it's at the option of the employee, I believe. Mike, are you familiar with
Yeah,
that?
please. Yeah, and the only other caveat is that they're not aligned with the collective bargaining agreement. So unfortunately, as Victor mentioned earlier, nearly all of your employees are associated with the collective bargaining agreement. So they would have to join the regular retirement system, which is a defined benefit.
So over the past 3 decades, the pension contributions have increased significantly. So in this bar chart, you see the ERS, which is in light blue. ERS, again, applies to the employees' retirement system. This is for our non-certificated staff, such as our bus drivers, monitors, aides, custodians, service employees. TRS is dark blue, and that applies to our teachers, teaching assistants, and administrators. You see in the 90s, the contribution rates were 1.2 to 5.7% between the two pension systems. Fast forward to the 2010s, this past decade, you can see it's exploded the contribution rate. Again, that the state requires the districts to contribute. On average, it's been 15.9% for the ERS system and 11.7% for the TRS system. So we're hoping that we're going to get back to these days so that we can have some relief from our pension systems. And fortunately, heading into the 2019-20 budget season, we are seeing some relief from both systems.
Victor, why is the ERS so much higher than the TRS?
It's how the system is managed. It has, there are a million different variables from life expectancy to earnings and vesting amounts, and also the portfolio of each system, how well it's performed. So based on all of those factors, the system determines the contribution rate.
The ERS has lower salary basis.
It does.
So probably has a higher percentage.
Could be. So here's just a look at our ERS budget, and I just want to note that ERS alone makes up 2% of our budget, which is a pretty substantial amount for a single budget item to make up 2% of our budget. And as you can see, over the past 2 years, we've gotten relief from the ERS pension system. It's gone down 2 years. Actually, it's gone down several years in a row. And if I extended this to 1920, you'll see that number go down again. So that's a good thing for the school, and it means that we're able to keep more money here in Worcester locally, as opposed to sending a check out to Albany each year. But contrast that with the TRS, and you see that we're also subject to the volatility of the TRS, which makes up 4% of our budget. So it's an even larger portion of our budget that goes to the TRS system. Heading into the 17-18 school year, we received pension relief from the TRS system, and it was great. And we enjoyed that relief. We sent less money up to Albany, we kept more money locally, we invested in our programs. Then what happened this year, this 18-19 school year? The pension contribution rate went up. It went up 8.5%, which is a substantial amount when the TRS makes up 4% of our budget as a single item. So again, if we're trying to keep in our minds a fictional 2%, having an 8.5% increase on something that makes up such a large portion of our budget is very damaging for us. But again, excuse me, if I was to fast forward this and include another year, we're actually going to get some relief from the TRS system entering the 1920 school year. So again, we're going to be able to keep more money locally as opposed to sending it out to Albany. So that's going to be a good thing entering this budget cycle. Again, so the state tells the state defines what the contribution rates are. So it's based on their portfolio performance. It's based on mortality.
So if they didn't do well, you might have to
Correct.
add some money in because they lost money.
Correct.
Is that person for each district, the percentage?
Yes, it's across all of New York State. So any school district in New York State has the same contribution rates to the system statewide. Same with the ERS, their state systems.
There's money being invested.
We have to go on the state website.
Yeah. The New York State Controller's Office manages the pension plans. And what I do know about the plans and their investments, or I should say, what I do know about the contribution amounts and how they're determined, it's supposedly based on a 5-year smoothing average. But as you can see, it's not very smooth when there's an 8.5% increase.
How much money is the 8.5% increase?
In terms of our budget, I would say it's probably $600,000.
One more question.
Yep.
You talked about when we realized this decrease and were able to keep money back in the school district. What determines whether you talked about investing it in other programming, that sort of thing, which is great, but it almost feels like if it's this volatile, if we get money back, we should be holding it.
And that's a great point.
Because it's going to go up again and do our own smoothing, so to speak.
That's a great point. That's a really important point. And that's something that legislators have been working for at least the past decade on creating a reserve, a TRS reserve, to protect school districts from this volatility. So there's actually a reserve which is allowable for the ERS system, the employees retirement system. So when there are sharp increases, we have a reserve that we can pull money out of our reserve to help float us in those years in which there's a spike in the contribution rate. The New York State law does not permit school districts from reserving funds to protect themselves from this volatility. And legislators have been working for at least the past decade on getting approval for funding a reserve to protect schools. And each year it seems like we get closer and closer where it will be passed either the Senate and then it'll fail the Assembly or vice versa, and it'll get to the governor and then it'll be vetoed. And I think that there's really some traction to protect schools in the future. We're hopeful that a reserve will be passed that will be able to protect us in the future. That's a great question.
Do
Like,
we
do you
have to
anything
spend the money though?
Victor,
Just to
there's a
follow up on that,
question. I think there's confusion about the money you say that. So in years when we don't have to send as much up, I think what you said was then that money is
Invested
kept
in
back in the
some
district. And
program.
your question
But
is, what are you?
what if we
investing
chose
in?
not to invest it and we put it in our whatever account or like,
Well,
we have to spend it?
No, you don't have to spend it. What we would do in a year such as next year is we would reduce our budget for the TRS expense. So we wouldn't just keep our budget at that same
Right.
level and just pay less out of it and squirrel
Right.
away that money. We would reduce our budget in TRS and then invest that money elsewhere, throughout our programs.
Victor, if this is 4% of our budget, and the increase is 600,000, that would be 15% increase, not 80.
Don't quote me on the I don't have the numbers in front of me.
I'm talking about 300.
Is it 4% of the budget, or is it 4% of that went up?
It's 4% of the budget.
Of our-
So our
so
TRS
our-
budget is roughly $4 million, and we have a budget of $98 million. So it's roughly 4%. So what the increase would be, I don't have the numbers.
300,000.
An 8.5% increase on $4 million. Yeah. Okay. All right. Okay, so moving forward to FICA, Federal Insurance Contributions Act. This is mandated for all employee wages, Social Security for all amounts under $128,700. We have to pay 6.2% to the Social Security Administration. Medicare for 1.45% of all wages to the Social Security Administration. This is mandated by federal law and can't be changed. Workers' comp, life insurance, disability insurance, and unemployment insurance make up about 1% of the budget collectively. Brewster participates in a cooperative workers' compensation consortium with 18 other districts in Putnam, Northern Westchester. And by pooling our risk, we receive better economies of scale in terms of our insurance coverages and the premiums that we pay. And over the past 5 years, our workers' comp expenses have averaged by an increase of just 1% a year. So it really helps the district by pooling with those other districts and pooling our risk, which helps us achieve better premiums. Unemployment insurance is required by New York State. Anytime an employee is eligible for unemployment insurance, we have to pay New York State. Life insurance and disability insurance are very small components of our district. They apply to the SEIU bargaining unit, non-union employees, and the Administrators Association of Brewster, and they're subject to collective bargaining negotiations. Any changes to those benefits? Question?
Sorry, I just had about the last slide, and maybe you can talk about it another time. So we had that spike, and we had to spend more money to all people. So we had to cut programming in that year? How
Yes,
do we
very much so.
determine-
Very much so.
Is there a place where I can see what was cut?
You can refer to our budget statement from last year. It's up on our website.
And show yearly, something around budget?
And we also had all of our budget presentations were recorded and they're available on our YouTube also.
So how do you explain the exact programs?
It's a decision each year. It's a conversation with the superintendent and the Board of Education, and that's our conversation from February through April.
Are there certain programs that are absolutely forbidden to be cut, or?
mandated services are forbidden from being
Special education. Can't do that. Okay, that's what I thought. Okay.
So health insurance is a huge, huge part of our budget. Health insurance makes up 13% of our budget. But we're fortunate, again, just like our workers' comp consortium, we belong to a consortium with now 13 other districts in Northern Westchester BOCES. Again, we pool risk, which lowers our premium costs. Over the past 10 years, our health insurance premiums have increased by an average of just 3.2%, which is very favorable as compared to some of the other plans, the Swiss Chip plan and the Night Shift plan, which are the largest employer plans throughout the state of New York. Employee health insurance contributions are subject to collective bargaining negotiations. Again, these contribution rates as a percentage have existed decades before the tax cap came into play, and they're subject to collective bargaining negotiations. They range from 6% to 20% across the different bargaining units, and any changes to them are subject to negotiations. I want to note that every bargaining unit in the district has agreed to higher health insurance contributions for future employees. Again, this is a prospective change, so any new employee in the district on or after the effective date would be paying that higher percent. And for most of the collective bargaining units, that rate is 20%. Any other changes to health insurance contribution rates are subject to collective bargaining negotiations. And just to show as a bar chart, just to show the employee contribution percentage as compared to the employer, we have three plan offerings, or three tiers: an employee tier, an employee plus one, or a family tier. And you can see, at 6%, the district is contributing the majority of the health insurance premium costs. And even at the 20%, the highest tier, the district is substantially contributing more than the employee portion.
And this isn't dissimilar from other districts.
No, and that's where we're going to ask Mike to chime in actually after this slide. So retiree health insurance has been a challenge for not only this district, but for many other districts, and also for Putnam Northern BOCES. So retiree health insurance by bargaining unit. Within the SEIU unit, employees are generally eligible for health insurance coverage in retirement after 10 or 15 years of service. Their contribution rates in retirement are generally the amount that they paid in the last year of service. Within the VTA, they're generally eligible after 7 or 10 years of service, depending on when the employee joined the bargaining unit. Their contribution rates range from the amount they paid in their last year of service to 100% district contribution.
No, it's the projector.
The clerical A and B non-union are generally eligible for coverage after 10 years of service, like the other bargaining units. Contributions range from the percentage paid in the last year of service to a 90% district contribution. Again, you'll see here the yellow when the screen actually pops on that any changes to retiree benefits are subject to collective bargaining negotiations. So the district can't say we're entering a difficult budget cycle. We're no longer going to fund the health insurance of our retirees. That is subject to, again, the Taylor law, as Mr. Sarah mentioned earlier, and the district can't change those provisions without bargaining out of the contracts.
Vic,
Yes.
question. What's, so when you say retiree health insurance, this is health coverage until they reach Medicare eligibility?
Yes, when they reach Medicare eligibility, Medicare becomes the primary, and this plan becomes the secondary.
And second question to that, what's the average retirement age of teachers then leaving?
I don't know that off the top of my head, but within the retirement systems, under Tier 4, which is the largest tier, which contains the most employees, a standard service time is 30 years and 55 years of age. At least in my experience, it's not common that employees retire at age 55. It doesn't happen that often, but I don't have that information.
And they stay later?
Correct.
Victor, so the clerical, AAB, and non-union. So non-union, you can't, I know that a lot of those are contract employees, but you can't change that?
If an employee retires, the term.
Post-retirement, yeah, but I'm saying, like, when people come in, so when we have the new super come in, that's a non-union position. Currently, I think it's like 3 years or something like that. So is there ability to extend that and say the new contract is going to have 10 years of service as the threshold for lifetime health insurance?
And that's a decision for the Board of Education to make, and, all of those things to be considered.
No, I get that, but we don't have, am I correct that we can change that without, that's not collective
Yes.
bargaining? And today, we don't have that stipulation.
Yeah, a new contract can include any provisions.
But you're also like what Mrs. Garrett said, there are other contracts. New York State has a New York State Council of School Superintendents. Their job is to make sure that they're fair contracts. So they would not recommend for a superintendent to accept something that is inconsistent with what the other 699 superintendents across the state of New York would have. So everyone looks at historical data and looks at what other districts are doing, so that, and then of course that's negotiated with the Board of Education's council, and there's some agreement that's made. But there are a lot of templates that are used. Very few things just sort of like are pulled out of the hat, and again, people sort of do things that are not already sort of in place as some kind of precedent.
Right. And that's a fair point, but I think Nora's looked at it, I've looked at it, we've looked at other contracts where we have an incredibly generous contract in the non-financial. So the payout at the end based on sick time, how quickly you can become qualified for for lifetime retirement health insurance. So those things, I always reference Chappaqua because I've read that contract. Like those actually are much less than MasterCard, have about a $30,000 more a year pay. But when you look at the lifetime and so forth, you're seeing those differences, and where Brewster is quite generous on that.
Well, and actually, but I didn't benefit from that generosity. My predecessors really had generous contracts.
I know.
Yeah, right?
Yeah, I think.
Sand-based is in New York
So,
Times. It's one of the highest.
And boards of education look at that and try to make concessions, but, and it's not just here. I mean, there are many places
And
where
it's being
there's.
much more competitive.
Yeah.
Totally, and New York and all that stuff comes into factor.
Yeah, I think
So
that's an excellent point. It's a competitive marketplace. Right?
Yeah.
As much as it may sound great when you say we have the lowest salaries in the region, we have the highest health contributions in the region. We had districts, we've seen districts within the negotiations clearinghouse that had health insurance premiums that were much higher than others. They had a very difficult time attracting folks to do those jobs. So you start to question whether or not you're cutting off your nose to spite your face for some of those things. So there's a lot that goes into that pot, but it's important to remember it's always a competitive marketplace. You're competing against all the local districts for that talent.
Finally, we have other welfare benefits, which is essentially vision and dental. The PTA welfare fund is eligible to PTA clerical, AAB, and non-union employees. The contribution amount is fixed in the collective bargaining agreement with Brewster Teachers Association, $2,140, $49 per employee. The SEIU has a similar plan, but it's more of a pay-as-you-go plan, eligible to full-time SEIU employees providing vision and dental benefits. The contribution amount in 1819 is $595 maximum per employee. Again, it's more of a pay-as-you-go plan. Changes to welfare benefits, again, are subject to collective bargaining negotiations. So any changes to these need to be negotiated with the bargaining. And this makes up just 1% of the budget. So mitigating salary benefit increases. So how does the district offset the effective increases in salaries and benefits that may exceed the amounts allowable by the tax cap and state aid? Well, as Dr. Haig mentioned in the beginning of the presentation, there's breakage when we have an employee retire and that employee is replaced by a new employee. Generally, the salary for the new employee is much less than that vacated by the retiree, which provides savings to the district on a budget basis. Tax cap and state aid increases, decreases in expenses. Again, I mentioned heading into the 1920 school year, we're going to see relief in the TRS and ERS pension systems, which is going to reduce those budgets and then allow for the growth in the salary base, which again is subject to those salary schedules. Negotiations, which the district has attempted through collaboration with each bargaining units, to implement new salary schedules for new bargaining unit members, which will limit those increases, those step increases again to more closely align with the tax cap. Also, the negotiations reduce benefits for employees to shift expenses such as health insurance from the district to the employee. And finally, through attrition, if a retiree's position is not replaced. So I'm actually going to turn it over to Mike Scarrett for bumping over Manchester Moses. It's not an expectation that you'd be able to read these slides. This is the handout that was in the back of the room before you got there.
I'm forcing you to take the handouts with you when you go. And as I work with Mr. Carlson to kind of just put some kind of global thoughts together for the region and all the districts that we work with, I kind of thought about salaries, other compensation, health insurance, other items. And as we continue to talk through many of the things that I mentioned, Victor said, yep, we've done that, we tried that, we're doing that. So I really need to applaud the Brewster Central School District for doing many of the things that when the tax cap first came out, administrators and unions, I'm sure, and communities said, well, how are we going to pull this off? Because ultimately those contracts that we talked about that are binding, that we can't unilaterally change, locked us into certain percentages. And as I look across the districts for our service, the average step increase was between 3 and 5%. So some districts might get the low end, some districts might get the high end. And that could vary between the different bargaining units. But and as Victor said earlier, the tax cap of 2% really isn't 2%, but it's a nice number to kind of set as your threshold. If everything kind of just rolled forward, you'd be cutting program. Right? And nobody wants to cut program. You want to grow program, you want to offer additional services to your students and to your community. So the only way to get there was to have partnerships with the unions and have partnerships with administration where you came together and said, we understand the value of what we're trying to provide here and we're willing to make sacrifices. And you guys did that in spades. And I'm not saying that because I'm standing here in this room. I'm saying that because that's what the data reveals. So I really applaud you for that. The first bullet on my slide here talks about the 3 to 5% step increase. So Victor mentioned it earlier that this isn't a Brewster thing, this is an education thing in this region. There's steps as high as 10 to 15%. So Victor mentioned the 6.7. At BOCES, we had a 13% increase in one of our steps. And a step that many of the folks were going to pass through, in a lane that they were going to pass through. In our last negotiations, we had to address that. And I was thankful that our group did that. But that was something that, as we were thinking about our budgets, was a real challenge for us if there was a big pool of people who were coming through on that step. Some districts have sought to create the new schedules. As I mentioned, these are global thoughts. Victor's hit on a lot of these already, which is, again, is why I applaud you so much for that. That they tried to create schedules, and they said, we understand, we don't want to impact the employees that created this organization, created this district, that led to the success of this district. But we need to make changes if we're going to do that with the folks that haven't arrived yet. So that was a way to smooth it out, to address the problem, again, while not impacting directly and harshly those that were already in place. So they created new salaries. They tried to negotiate sub-steps. So I just mentioned a couple of Westchester BOCES where we had the one step that was 13. We knew we couldn't keep living with that. So we worked on sub-steps then and broke those big chunks into smaller chunks. And you guys did that. They sought step freezes or deferring step movement. Maybe you waited until February until you got your steps. We basically did it now. What otherwise would have been. You guys did that. So all those things are things that the region tried to do. There's not a silver bullet. It's not like, again, not like private industry where you can just unilaterally change things. It has to be done over time in collaboration with unions. And again, other compensation items, retirement incentives, as mentioned earlier. There's a lot that goes into that, right? It is a very personal decision. You put a very rich number or favorable number on it, but some folks just, quite frankly, aren't ready to go, right? They have mortgages, they have college, folks in college. And when you do those kind of retirement incentives, it's not just the dollar amount that you're paying out here. You're potentially now having to pay retiree health insurance. Now you're paying dual health insurance. So you have to kind of think about that. You also have to think about, many times, your most senior teachers, they've matured, they've developed the skills. They're the people that you want to keep. And it's not necessarily a financial transaction. So you really have to think about what goes into that. And that's decisions that are made at the administrative level in concert with the board of education. Districts sought to add money to the longevity schedule. Again, they said, you paid your dues, you helped build this district. So we want to incent you by adding it to the longevity schedule rather than adding it to the salaries. They sought flat dollar amounts or kind of one-time or non-recurring amounts. What that really does is, once it's in your budget, I give you a non-recurring amount, not added to your salary schedule, so everybody gets $500. Once you get it, or whatever the number might be, once you get it into your budget, there's no budget-to-budget increase the next year. That's really what you're chasing, is that budget-to-budget increase that can't exceed that quote-unquote 2%. On the health insurance side, the health consortium, Victor mentioned this earlier, 3.2% in the last 10 years. You're in the Putnam Health Consortium. Again, the pooling of that risk helps. And I often tell folks, we're not looking to make money, and the consortium's not looking to make money. We're looking to cover the cost of those lives. So the decision to do that, as opposed to buying private health insurance, is many times very advantageous to districts. Take advantage of that. The health insurance contribution for the region is right around 15%. It's almost exactly 15%. That's right where you are. Again, that's the value of being a part of a service like the Negotiations Clearinghouse, where you can see what everybody else is doing. Because I can almost assure you that if you were twice that amount, you would have some challenges with trying to obtain the most talented individuals. So you kind of have that information. Contractual health contributions are increasing by roughly 0.25% to 1%. So again, unions understand and administration understands that over time we need to try to keep up with rising health insurance costs. No matter what the consortiums do in terms of trying to keep costs down, they're going to increase. I think we all kind of understand that. So unions working with administration to say we're willing to take on a larger share of that. It's imperative to keep your budgets down. Districts all over. And another issue that really percolates for many districts is the cost of retiree health insurance. People are living longer. Unfortunately, as we age, sometimes we're not quite as healthy. Until through the late 90s, almost into the 2000s, many districts paid full cost of health insurance. It was only in the early 2000s that districts were able to start to attack to address those health insurance costs by getting employee contributions. Again, those will continue to rise more likely than not, but you still have a lot of retirees that you're paying the full cost for. So that's a real challenge. Not only for Brewster, but for everybody in the region. And then the last thought, again, I don't know how this fits into many of the conversations already, but absenteeism is a challenge that many districts deal with. I saw a lot of signs coming down today about substitute teachers needed. So many things that districts are talking about now are incentives to pay out for sick time when folks retire, so that you don't necessarily want to use all your sick time if there may be a benefit when you retire. That benefits you a couple of reasons. One, you're not paying the cost of substitutes, but your regularly scheduled staff members are your most qualified to be here. So that you have that. So yeah, as we went
address
down.
that one? I have a lot of questions.
Yeah, I do too.
Because, I mean, that just incentivizes people
To come in sick.
So you walk out of here, you know, my husband, teacher, never takes a sick day, maybe once for the kids a year, maybe twice if I could get him to do that. He's worked as a teacher for 10 years, got 185 days. Now Chappaqua caps it, and so he does it. So now you're saying, let's not cap it, let's have it. You get 10 sick, I work in corporate America, I get 10 sick days. I either use them or lose them. And I only use them when I'm actually sick, and then I don't have them. Next year I got to replenish bank of that. When you say, like, oh, let's continue to expand the bank, you're looking at a higher payout.
Yeah, that's not what I'm saying.
No,
I'm saying consider.
Yeah,
that.
but I'm saying, like, you know, understand unions work. This is my other half of my financial world, is being married to all this. But, like, don't incentivize people to scam the system. Like you say, here's your 10. You don't use them because you didn't need them. And by the way, you only work 9 months out of the year. Very stressful 9 months. But, you know, like, there's a way to do it. I'm sorry, Annette.
Yeah, I was also thinking, do we want to encourage them to come to work sick?
Yeah.
I mean,
PTO days.
like, we don't want to use your sick days. Go to work sick. So I also have a problem with it, just even from that aspect, where we don't want people going to work sick, especially we don't want them making children sick, and then they bring it home to their families. And,
No, I don't believe anybody would
Yeah.
advocate that, but there's
yeah,
certainly,
but
there's
I mean,
differences in
we're
illness.
saying don't use your sick day, go to work instead, and we'll pay it out to you later. Well, you got a bad cold, stay home. That's my point. So, yeah, I'm with you. Quite, yeah, good.
Okay, so that concludes our presentation for this evening. So, again, if you have any questions, certainly ask. Just want to take a look forward. January 14th is our next Budget 101. We'll be talking about equipment, professional supplies, mostly services of each of the different departmental budgets. That makes up about 14% of our budget as a whole. So really, this presentation for this evening is about, I think it was 78% of our budget. So this is the lion's share of our budget, what impacts us in budget development. And then on Monday, February 11th, we'll be talking about state aid, tax cap, and other revenues. And I always quote tax cap because it's not really a 2% tax cap. It's just a tax cap. Any questions this evening?
When you go into budget negotiations, I'm assuming you have prepared what it's going to look like based on how they had it on the last contract as far as what the dollar amounts would be, right? So you can go in and say, based on steps, this is how much we're going to be paying out based on retiree. You have all that, and so you can go into the table, go to the tables and say, this is what we have. Where can we play with?
But the union contracts are not negotiated during the budget season.
No, I know, but the next time it comes up, so they're 3 years or 5 years, when you go into that 5th year, whenever you start negotiating that contract, you go in with that knowledge base and say, these are our dollars for these particular buckets. This is where we figure out where you're gonna freeze, step, sub-step, what
Yeah,
have you.
well, we never know what our next year's budget is going to look like. So we really don't know.
You don't know state aid, which is a big variable. You don't know
So,
TRS,
but you know the
TRS.
step value, you know the salary
Yeah, we-
values, you know the health insurance, you know if it stayed at the same level.
Right.
So you can go in and say, if we stay at this.
Right, which is called tri-borough.
Right.
So tri-borough means all other things remain constant except employees because of the tri-borough amendment to the Taylor law. All employees are eligible to step. So we know at a minimum, even if we don't settle this contract, there's going to be an increase just by virtue of those employees stepping each year.
Victor, first off, thank you for putting all this together. I know it's a lot of work.
Thank all of you.
For the next meeting, because I get this meeting, a lot of this is you can't control. We totally get that. And I think the next meeting, a lot of those items are more controllable, perhaps. But will we be going through all of them, such as like transportation?
Yeah, we're going to invite each budget manager to come and describe the different types of things that are required by their department and where.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions for this evening? All right, thank you all for coming this evening. Immediately following this, we're going to have our first budget advisory committee. So stick around. We're in the budget advisory committee. If you'd like to join, you're more than welcome. We'll likely be the last.
Thank you, Mr. Scarrett, for coming and giving us
Pleasure to be
the 30,000-foot view of all of this. I hope you do see the complexities of establishing a school district budget, and that a lot of decisions and a lot of analysis goes into making the decisions. None of this is, done without a lot of thought, and most importantly, considerations for what experience we want children to have, and how we can educate them to the best of our ability, so that they are in classes, enjoying themselves, happy, and having their needs met. And that's the bottom line. That's the philosophy that's embedded here. We're talking about numbers, but behind these numbers are children. And there are precisely 3,062 children in our system. And this budget is in service to them. So we can't ever lose sight of that when we're talking about, well, why can't you take it from there and take it from there and take it from there? This is about making sure that our children are well educated. We have facilities that honor them, so that they are sitting in spaces that they can learn and that are comfortable and that are state of the art, so that they're using tools that help them to be successful when they leave us and go on and graduate. that we are attracting talented teachers and also keeping talented teachers. And all of that is part of this big number at the end of the day. But thank you for coming. Please encourage your friends to watch our videos and go onto our website to see those, anything that's archived that you may have missed. Thank you, Chris, for capturing all of that and making that available. And thank you all for coming. We have board members here. Thank you.